Our scripture from this evening is from Revelations chapter 18, verses 9 through 12, and also 15 through 17. And the kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived in luxury with her will weep and wail over her when they see the smoke of her burning. They will stand far off in fear of her torment and say, Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, the mighty city. For in 1 hour your judgment has come, and the merchants of the earth weep and mourn for her, since no one buys their cargo anymore. Cargo of gold, silver, jewels and pearls, fine linen, purple silk, and scarlet. All kinds of scented wood, all articles of ivory, all articles of costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble. The merchants of these wares, who gained wealth from her, will stand far off, in fear of her torment, weeping and mourning aloud. Alas, alas, the great city, clothed in fine linen, in purple and scarlet, adorned with gold, with jewels, and with pearls. For in 1 hour, all this wealth has been laid waste. Blessed are those who hear the word of our Lord and believe. Tonight, we're going to be talking about protecting our earth. And I chose this particular environmental concern called fracking because it's very common to us here in Pennsylvania and has a big impact on us, not only economically, but also as far as environmentally. So I wanted to present this tonight so that we can take a look at it and see, because there's a lot of going back and forth. We saw on the news, we saw one town kept bringing water in because they thought their water supply was contaminated, and of course the EPA did testing and said no, it's not. And Cabot, the Cabot, who is the driller up there, got all upset and was saying, this is all a way of trying to get them pushed out. So there's been a lot of controversy in the news, a lot of controversy in our papers, and in regards to whether this is good, because people are selling their land to the drillers, and they're making big bucks. And they're then being portrayed as betrayers and betraying because they're being greedy and all they want is money. And of course the gas companies are also being looked at, and they're being condemned and such and so on and so forth. So we want to take a look at what fracking is and whether it's something that we need to stand up against or whether it's something that we need to support. So tonight we're going to take a look at this whole thing. But first what we're going to do is, what is fracking? Well, fracking is called induced hydraulic fracturing, or hydrofracking, commonly known as fracking. It's a technique to release petroleum, to release natural gas, including shale gas, tight gas, and coal seam gas, or other substances for extraction, such as coal methane. Now, this type of fracturing creates fractures from a wellbore drilled into reservoir rock formations, as you can see there on the slide. And basically what happens is the proponents of fracking, those who support this, say that vast amounts of formerly inaccessible hydrocarbons, natural gas and coal oil and also methane gases, are all down there ready to extract and can bring us these natural resources that we once couldn't get a hold of, and causing, of course, the prices to increase. And this will actually bring the prices down and make it available. And just like we did here at church, we switched from oil to natural gas. Well, one of the reasons is because fracking has allowed natural gas prices to come down a little bit. But the opponents of fracking point to the potential environmental impacts, including contamination of the groundwater, risk to the air quality, and also the chemicals that are used in this process. They're concerned with what's called flowback. And flowback is where they bring these chemicals, a lot of them come back up to the top, and when they come back up to the surface, they then have to be pumped away. They have to either be taken away by a tanker truck, or they're put in storage tanks, or they're put in big reservoir ponds at the top. And we'll see a slide on that in just a minute. So with this stuff going on, they're concerned about the environmental impact. And we're going to look at some of the environmental impact. The first thing we're going to do is we want to look at what the proponents say. Okay, energyfromshale.org. Okay, energyfromshale.org. They say that water accounts for 90% of the fracturing mixture. 90% is water. Sand and ceramic beads, called propinants, and you'll see that in a little bit. It's called propins, which is sand and ceramic beads, make up 9.5%. So sand, ceramic beads, and water make up 99.5% of the fracturing material. 0.5 or 1/2% make up are the chemicals that are in the fracturing material. Okay, so only 0.5%. Now, according to John Hanger, who is a former secretary of the Department of Environmental Protection for the state of Pennsylvania, he says it's our experience in Pennsylvania that we have not had one case in which fluids used to break off the gas from 5,000 to 8,000 feet underground have returned to contaminate groundwater. Okay? So anything from about a mile to a mile and a half down has not contaminated groundwater. Okay? That's what the EPA, former secretary of the EPA, said for Pennsylvania. 35,000. 35,000. Now, it goes back to about 2005 is when a lot of this stuff really started. 2005, 2010, or it's 2007, but it's been the last few years that really has boomed. But I'm laying the groundwork, so hang in there. No, that's all right. Because this is, 5,000 feet to 8,000 feet is almost a mile down. Okay? Mile or more down. But there's lots of stuff that's above the 5,000 feet that have been going after. So that's kind of a deceptive statement. So I'll give you that little tidbit right there. He's saying that from 5,000 to 8,000, they've had no groundwater contamination coming up. He's being very specific because the fact is we know that groundwater has been contaminated from shallower wells. Okay, and you're going to see that as we go through this. So who is energyfromshale.org? Well, I had to do a little bit of research to find out who these people are because energyfromshale.org is they're really behind this. This is a great thing. This is good, keeps prices down. All the good stuff. Well, I found out that energyfromshale.org is the American Petroleum Institute. Yes. And the API is the only national trade association that represents all aspects of the American oil and natural gas industry. More than 490 corporate members from the largest major oil company to the smallest independent come from all segments of this industry. And here's their statement. We speak for the petroleum industry to the public, to Congress, to the executive branch, to state governments, and to the media through programs like Energy Tomorrow. In other words, they're lobbyists. It's plain and simple. They're lobbyists. They say, we negotiate with regulatory agencies. No, wait a minute. I thought regulatory agencies were supposed to set down the rules. Why would you negotiate with them? Okay? We negotiate with regulatory agencies, represent the industry in legal proceedings, meaning they got their high-priced corporate attorneys behind them. They participate in coalitions and work in partnerships with other associations to achieve our members' public policy goals. Okay? So that immediately, and it took me a while to figure out who Energy Shale, and when they hid, they were actually hiding. You eventually could track them back and find out who they are. And it took a little bit to find, but that kind of made me suspicious right off the bat. But hydraulic fracturing, okay, here's what actually happens. Geologic formations contain large quantities of oil or gas, but they have poor flow rates due to low permeability or from damage or clogging of the formation during drilling. So as they're drilling it, it collapses in on the formations collapse in on the drill casings, or everything gets clogged up and they can't do it. Now, anybody who does, if anyone, I'm not sure if anybody knows exactly how they do this, but what they literally do is as they drill a hole down into the ground, as they drill, they put casings. Okay? They'll pull the drill bit out, they'll put a casing down. They'll drill some farther in, and they'll push that casing down, and they'll put another casing. So they're drilling down through the center. What they're doing is they're making a hole with a casing, a metal casing going all the way down in the ground. And that's what you're seeing here on this slide. You're seeing how they're bringing this casing all the way down. Okay? Now, here they're showing that they actually then send it out this way. Okay? And what usually happens is it comes all the way down. Okay? And then what they do is they send a charge. They send a charge down through the casing that explodes and sends bolts right through the casing. It's called a perforating gun. And it sends bolts through the and now they can inject water and the things out into these areas. Okay? So the casing is actually perforated with these bolts. It's a pipe that has bolts sticking out of it. And they lower it down into the casing, and they detonate it, and the bolts fire, and they perforate that casing, and now they can inject all this water and such down in there. Right. Now, sometimes the pipe will come out, and depending on how they're drilling and what they can do, yes, sometimes the drills they'll bend, but think about it, a metal casing doesn't really bend. So they really have to come straight down. What they do, though, is once they get into this area and they start fracturing it, then they can send a more malleable down in there and continue pumping water into that. Okay? So the fracturing process occurs after a well has been drilled and a steel pipe has been inserted in the well bore. The casing is perforated within target zones that contain oil and natural gas so that the fracturing fluid can be injected in the well, that it flows through those perforations into the target zones. Eventually, the target formation will not be able to absorb the fluid as quickly as it's being injected. At that point, the pressure creates cracks or fractures in the formation. So they're forcing this water down the casing and out these perforated holes into this area and just sending sand and water and chemicals out into this, and the pressure is just literally cracking the shale and releasing the natural gas. Now, as that natural gas then is released, then not only does the gas start coming out, but what else comes out? All that water and, right, so anywhere from 20% to 85% of that water and chemicals actually stay in the ground. That's a large range. 20 to 85% stay in the ground. A lot of it's brought back up. And, as you can see, they're put into watershed ponds up there in the corner. Okay? They're put into watershed ponds. Or they're trucked away. Okay? So, this fluid and these chemicals all stay down in the ground. 20 to 80% of it. But a lot of it still comes back up. So, depending on the well, and depending on what that gives, the sand, what's called propents, the sand and the beads go in there and they keep those fractures open. That's what the sand and the ceramic beads do. They keep the fractures open. The chemicals eat away and keep an open flow for the gas to come back out. Okay? So and it also keeps those perforations clear as well. So we know that 90% is water, 9.5% is sand and ceramic beads, and only 0.5% is chemicals. However, in 2010, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency estimated that 70 to 140 billion gallons of water are used to fracture 35,000 wells in the United States, not just in Pennsylvania, in the United States, a year. That means each well uses somewhere between 2 to 4 million gallons of water per well. 2 to 4 million. Now, here's the really good part. To get that water there takes 1 million gallons of water, takes 200 truck trips. 200 truck trips just to get 1 million gallons. So if you're using, just take the average of 3 million gallons, 2 to 4, 3, that's 600 truck trips on these back roads, on these farmlands. 600 truck trips just to get the water in. Now, once you get all that water in, and it all comes back up and sits in that reservoir ponds, you got to get it out. So there's another, however many out. So, the big concern there is that it's literally depleting our freshwater supplies. That many millions of gallons of water is literally taking away our reservoirs. It's depleting our reservoirs because that's where they're getting the water. No, it's not. No, it's not recycled. It's not recycled water. Sand and ceramic beads, there's 4 million pounds per well. And that's in shale gas wells. 4 million pounds per well. Now, if it's a conventional oil or gas well, just a conventional well, it's about 300 pounds of propant. Coal-bred fracture treatments use up to about 320,000 pounds of propant. I know there's a lot of numbers, but you can see that it's large. I mean, you're talking about large amounts. So, frac sand mines are springing up across the country, from Wisconsin to Texas, bringing with them their own set of impacts. Mining sand for propant use generates its own impacts, including water consumption and air emissions. So now they're doing this strip mining for the sand. They're trying to get all the sand and stuff to make these ceramic beads. That's creating a whole bunch of problems itself. So that really becomes an issue. So not only do you have the water and the sand, now we get to the toxic chemicals, and they are toxic, by the way. These chemicals are definitely toxic. 80 to 330 tons of chemicals per well. 80 to 330 tons. Now, remember, it's only 0.5%, but when you're talking millions of gallons of water, that's a whole lot of chemical. Holy Hannah. So, when millions of gallons of water are used, the amount of chemicals per fracking operation is extremely large. So 4 million gallons of water would use 80 to 330 tons of chemicals. So many of the fracturing and many of the fracturing fluid chemicals are known to be toxic to human and to wildlife. For example, they tested the flowback samples in those reservoir ponds at the top. In Pennsylvania, they revealed that they had concentrations of dichloroethylene, which was 10 times the contaminant level that's allowed in drinking water. So, now that gives you an idea. That's how much they're putting down into these things, which, if you look here, this is a deep aquifer. An aquifer is where your drinking water is. Okay? Here's a shallow aquifer. Here's a deep aquifer. And look, and here's the problem they're talking about. If there's a fault line, and we know there's fault lines all over the place, if there's a fault line and these fractures are within it, what happens is it actually runs up the fault line into the aquifer. The chemicals can actually go into the aquifer through these fault lines. So the fracturing, and nobody knows where those are. You don't know where all the fault lines. We know where the major ones are. Obviously San Andreas. We know there's major ones here in Pennsylvania. But these fault lines can actually go into the deep aquifers, and the problem is that this water or these chemicals, and you're going to see a little later, they stay in the ground for years. For years. So the flowback is a problem. The flowback's a problem because here's a couple other things. The flowback has chemicals such as petroleum distillates, which is a kerosene, diesel fuel, benzene, ethylbenzene, toluene, xylene, methanol, formaldehyde, ethylene glycol. Ethylene glycol is what is in antifreeze. Glycol ethers, hydrochloric acid. Okay, these are all toxic chemicals that are being put down into these wells. Okay. Now, according to the researchers at the University of Pittsburgh Center for Healthy Environments and Communities, organic compounds brought to the surface in fracturing flowbacks or produce water often go to open impoundments, frac ponds, where the volatile organic chemicals can off-gas into the air. Off-gas into the air. So what happens is the flow back comes and sits in these ponds, and then the chemicals can actually evaporate up into the air. And what happens when chemicals evaporate up into the air and they mix with the clouds? We have then acid rain. And you have contamination all over the whole area. So as this gas off-gas, or as this liquid off-gas, these chemicals, the people who live in that area, all around that area, are breathing those vapors. The workers are breathing those vapors as well. So, and the hydraulic fracturing fluids that they're using, the foaming agent, the corrosive inhibitor, the organic acid, the chelating agent, the liquid breaker acid, the biocide, the polymer slurry, those all have to be disposed of in a hazardous waste disposal facility. I mean, it's considered hazardous waste. So they got to truck all this stuff out and find one that they can actually dump all this fluid into. The gelling agent, the potassium chloride, goes to hazardous waste landfills. Coal bed methane additive has to be incinerated. The borate crosslinker has to be injected into a disposal well. The gelling agent can actually be neutralized and put into the sanitary sewer. Then it turns into recycled water. Okay. Here you can see, here's a farm. There's all the trucks hauling the water and hauling the stuff. Look at all these lines of taking the frac fluid to different wells. Now, if any one of those break, and look at this. This is right next to a roadway. Right next to a road, going around a telephone pole. And then you have a frac well out in the middle of nowhere. And look how close to it is to a farm and the farmland. And if that's a cornfield, guess what we're eating? If there's a spill, that off gas goes into the cornfield. There's lots of health concerns regarding this stuff, and it mainly is due to these chemicals that are injecting into these wells. The human exposure to fracking materials can occur by ingesting the chemicals that have been spilled because they enter the water. Any of these trucks get into an accident, and guess what? I have a whole list of where they did, and they dump their loads into creeks, which has happened. All this stuff goes into the drinking water. And that's exactly what's been going on. You have, through direct skin contact, so the workers there, the chemicals, the workers who respond to these spills are exposed to this stuff. The police officers, the healthcare professionals, the cleanups, the fire departments, are all exposed to this stuff when there's an accident. Okay? Residents who live in the area, these farmers, all these farmers and the kids, they are all exposed to this off gas or any spill that would occur. I mean, this is the whole thing with nuclear radiation. We're all concerned about nuclear reactors because you got to transport the uranium in, and then once the rods are used, you got to transport them out. And then what do you do with them? Well, there's the same exact things going on with these wells. So yes, it's bringing our natural gas prices down. At what cost? And are we? I know when I lived in Louisiana, there is a strip from Baton Rouge to New Orleans. Okay. Follows the Mississippi River, and you have Exxon Chem Plant, Exxon Refinery, BASF Wyandotte, the BASF tapes that you all get. All these Shell oil refinery, all these are along this. It's called. You know what it's called? Anyone want to take a guess what it's called? It's an alley. It's called an alley. Cancer Alley. From Baton Rouge, New Orleans, called Cancer Alley. It's where all these chemical plants are. And all this stuff gets dumped into the Mississippi River, and everybody in there has a higher cancer rate. People who live in that area have a higher cancer rate than the rest of the nation. That's why it's called Cancer Alley. So this is the same sort of thing that we're dealing with. 71 of the fracturing materials are associated with 10 or more health concerns. 10 or more. And that's 71 of them. And I have the whole list here. But I'll just, ethylene glycol, acetic acid, formaldehyde, ferrous sulfate, petroleum distillate, nickel sulfate, ammonium, ammonia, benzyl chloride, boric acid, calcium hydrochloride, chlorine, diesel 2, ethanol, ethylbenzene, methanol, hydrogen sulfide, isobutyl alcohol, the alcohol, isobutyl alcohol, methanol, urea, sulfuric acid, styrene, propane. Those are just some of the ones. There's a whole list here. It's amazing. So we have surface water and soil contamination due to these spills, and there are spills. There were 2 spills in September of 2009. Cabot Oil and Gas spilled hydraulic fracturing fluid gel, LGC-35, twice at the company's Heitzman gas well. Not just once, but twice. The 2 incidents released a total of 8,000 gallons of fracturing fluid polluting Stevens Creek and resulting in a fish kill. The well lubricant used during the fracturing process is LGC-35. The 3rd spill of LG-33 occurred a week later, but did not enter the creek. 3 spills, the same well. 2 of them hit the creek, one didn't. Fracturing fluid taints high-quality watershed. In December 2009, a wastewater pit overflowed, one of those wastewater pits, overflowed at Atlas Resources Cowden 17 gas well, and an unknown quantity of hydraulic fracturing fluid waste entered Dunkel Run, a high-quality watershed. The company failed to report the spill, and in August 2010, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection levied a $97,000 fine against Atlas Resources. That was in the bucket. $97,000. Nothing. Another fracturing spill impacts a high-quality watershed. That was in May of 2010. Range Resources was fined $141,000 for failing to immediately notify Pennsylvania DEP when a company spilled 250 barrels of diluting fracking fluid due to a broken joint in a transmission line. One of these transmission lines, a broken joint. The fluids flowed in an unnamed tributary of Brush Run, killing at least 168 fish, salamanders, and frogs. The water course is designed as a warm water fishery under Pennsylvania's Special Protection Waters Program. Fracturing fluids in 2005 leaked from a valve on a wellhead at the Kerr-McGee well in a Colorado field. As a result, 168 to 210 gallons of flowback fluid sprayed into the air and drifted off-site, primarily onto a pasture land, resulting in a visible coating that was a half-inch thick in the pasture. That's just from surface water and soil contamination. Then you have the groundwater contamination, which was mentioned. And this is usually from coal bed methane extraction or production areas. Okay? The EPA found that 10 out of 11 coal bed methane basins in the United States are located, at least in part, in the United States drinking watersheds. So it's in those aquifers. See, and the EPA said, we haven't had an incident between 5,000 and 8,000. Yeah, but they know for a fact, EPA knows that coal bed methane reserves are at least 10 out of 11 of the coal bed basins are actually in the drinking water basins, in those watersheds. And they know it. Remember, 20 to 85% of the fracturing fluids may remain in the formation, which means the fluids could continue to be a source of groundwater contamination for years to come. They may be laying down there dormant, and then all of a sudden we have one of those seismic fault lines break, goes into that area, and releases it right into the aquifer. Air quality. Many of the gas oil producing regions have seen a degradation in their air quality because the high level of benzenes are measured in airs near wells in the Barnett Shale gas fields. So benzene is actually off-gassing off of those things. And so they're seeing that the air quality in these areas are actually have high levels, and they're seeing the degradation of their air quality continue to decrease. So the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection looked for 70 volatile organic compounds in flowback, and they found 27 different chemicals. 37% of the chemicals were used in natural gas drilling, fracturing production. So even so the EPA here in PA, Department of Environmental Protection, DEP, looked for 70, and they found at least 27 of the chemicals in this flowback and in these things, and all from this natural gas. So in 2005, numerous Colorado residents experienced severe odors and health impacts related to flowback in drilling pits and tanks in Garfield County. In Pennsylvania, fracturing flowback wastewater pits just beyond June Chappelle's property line created odors similar to gasoline and kerosene, which forced her inside, left a greasy film on all of her windows, created a white dust that fell over her yard. In March of 2010, fracturing flowback wastewater impoundment in Washington County, Pennsylvania, caught fire and exploded, producing a cloud of thick black smoke that could be seen 7 miles away. For several days prior to the explosion, nearby citizens had tried to alert state officials about the noxious odors that were coming from these things. Nobody did anything about it, and then it finally explodes. The waste disposal, getting rid of this fracturing material, again, 25 to 100%, that's a pretty big range, but 25 to 100% of the chemicals-laced hydraulic fracturing fluids return to the surface from Marcella shale operations. So not just 20 to 85%, 25 to 100 of the fluids actually return to the surface. So in some situations, 75% remain low in the ground, and others come up just from Marcellus. They have Marcellus shale operations have 9 million gallons of wastewater per day. Per day. Yeah. So, in August 2010, Pennsylvania enacted new rules limiting the discharge of wastewater from gas drilling. The number of municipal facilities allowed to take drilling and fracturing wastewater, okay? So, in Pennsylvania, the number of facilities that can actually take this wastewater was 27 of them in 2010. And in 2011, 15. 15. Because they don't have the equipment capable of being able to properly handle this discharge of these chemicals. It's pretty bad. Here's the final thing. U.S. insurer won't cover gas drilling fracking operations exposure. Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company has become the first major insurance company to say it won't cover damage relating to a gas drilling process that blasts chemical-laden water deep into the ground. So if you live out here, if you live out in the country and you got Nationwide, they won't cover you for fracking stuff. They refused. Yeah, apparently not. Apparently not. The fact is that it's gone to the point now where fracking operations have actually been banned or suspended internationally in different parts of the world. Because other parts of the world have found this to be just too dangerous to the environment and absolutely just not. And they've actually banned it in some European countries, and in others, they've just suspended it until they can find out what the devil to do with this fracking material. Yeah, so it's really been bad. So so it comes back to the thing, what do we do? What do we do about this stuff? And basically, we as not only as U.S. citizens, as citizens of the state of Pennsylvania, but as Christians and people who are trying to live as disciples, we need to be good stewards. So we do have to stand up. So when this stuff comes up for votes, or when it comes up, when Corbett gave hundreds of millions of dollars of tax breaks to these gas companies for some 27 years, like 27 years of tax breaks. And what happened? They went in here, they started fracking, they got a whole bunch of natural gas. What happened to natural gas prices? They all went down. Guess what Cabot and Range and all these others did? They got up and left Pennsylvania and went to Ohio. Because the operations over there, because this Marcellus Shale, you can get natural gas out of, okay? And that's it. And it has limited use, okay? But if you go to Ohio, you can actually pull, the wells can actually pull not only natural gas, but they can also pull oil. They can actually hit both. And there's also coal bed methanes, and they can actually pull, it has more uses. So the wells over in Ohio can pull a multiple of different types of resources out of the ground that they can use for much more. This stuff is so limited, it's only natural gas production. So they left the state. That you'd have to talk to John Boehner about, I guess, because Boehner's from Ohio, so he's the Speaker of the House. I don't know. I'm not sure what it is, but I do know that they have up and left because it's more profitable. It's more profitable to get the stuff in Ohio than it is here because when they've got this, it's a limited use and you can't use it for other things, so therefore it's only can be with natural gas, and they've just dropped the price. So, you know, we as disciples, we as, you know, stewards of this earth need to stand up when these things come up. I mean, we need to voice our, you know, and be informed. You know, even if you're for this, even if this is wonderful because it brings the price of gas down, that's fine. But let's be informed. Let's find out what do we need to do to make sure that we don't get groundwater contamination, and let's make sure it goes in areas where it's not going to destroy our farm, you know, destroy some farmland, or it's going to, you know, it's going to be areas that we're not going to have to worry about groundwater contamination. Let's do it smart. That's all. It's not a matter of banning all this stuff. It's a matter of doing this smartly and being careful about what fracturing material, what fluids are they putting down there? I mean, there's 71 different fluids. This is nuts. I mean, why would you put diesel down into a well? I don't understand that. Now, I'm sure scientifically there's a reason, but anyway, we need to, you know, if we're going to, you know, for our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandchildren, generations to come, need clean water, need resources, and certainly we need to find alternate ways, but if we're going to destroy the earth in the process, it doesn't seem very smart to me. You had a question, Dawn?
Well, no, I wanted to find out, didn't they start, they had tax discounts, so to speak, and then in Pennsylvania for a certain period of time, and then they were going to have to start paying a slightly higher tax rate?
I have no idea. That I don't know. I honestly don't know how that, all I know is that Corbett gave a huge tax. It was a stepped tax? Okay. Then it, gotcha. Okay. So basically they came in, they did everything they need to do in 5 years to get as much as they get out, and then get the hell out. Right. Exactly. Well, exactly. Right. Sure. Right. Yeah. Not a delayed step. Very good. Thank you. So what Kirby, you were saying is it's a stepped taxation where very little in the beginning and then they pay a little more as they go. So as they come back, just because they leave doesn't mean it stops the time. So very good. Okay, thank you. So climb up, right? Then they'll come back. Out. That they can sell it for. Right. So I'm just going to repeat so the recording catches it. But what Curry is saying is that because the natural gas prices have dropped so much, it's actually costing them more to pull it out than it is for them to be able to sell it. So at this point, they've abandoned these wells for now. They'll wait till the price comes back up again, and then they'll come back in and they'll start doing it again. So yeah. So, you know, I understand they have to make a profit. I understand they have to make, you know, in order to be able to do this and get this natural gas out, you've got to be able to make your money out of that and cover your cost. And they also want a little buffer, of course, and we certainly understand that. But if they're going to destroy the land in the process, that's not really good. So we can't allow that to happen, and that's what's been going on. So, you know, from what I've seen and what I've researched, I mean, I was thinking about this as like, you know, everybody, whether you like standing up in front of people or not, everybody ought to get a chance to research our topics. Because I'll tell you, just doing the research for this was amazing. It was actually, and I looked for both sides. I wanted to find both sides, both the pros and the cons. And unfortunately, the pros is that it keeps the price down. It is getting gas that we couldn't get before. But the cons, the negatives are just so, scary. The pros have more money. You're right. You're right. So I don't think we're going to get rid of Marcellus Shale natural gas production. Right. Yes, exactly. It'll be our next. Right. It'll be our next Superfund. Our next Superfund sites to clean up. So the big thing right now is that these fracturing materials are being hauled through our communities. So if there is a big accident and a big spill, you can have this toluene and ethylene glycol and sulfuric acid in the streets of Allentown or on Route 22 because they're hauling it to a hazardous waste facility. So and the other thing you think about it, you think, oh my God! But if you ever see a tank car that's white with a red stripe around it horizontally, what's that? Right. It's all usually cyanide. Down in Louisiana, we got used to them, and we used to get really scared whenever we saw a white one with a red stripe around it horizontally in the middle, because we knew it was cyanide. So as responders, we always got really scared whenever we saw one come through town. But it was a byproduct of the oil industry, and we had to get used to it. So that's where we are with our fracking. I'm sure I know a lot of it was technical stuff and things, and you don't think of that kind of stuff in form of worship. But this is our earth. This is what God gave us, God's creation, and we're just laying it to waste. And that's why I picked the scripture I did, because the merchants who get the gold, the silver, and the wood sit there and they watch as Babylon, which is the industrialization, all is laid to waste. And that goes back to our scripture lesson. If I can get to it in time, I will. For in 1 hour all this wealth has been laid to waste. So that's kind of the idea here, is that, yes, it's saving us money in gas prices and making them a lot of money, but in the process, it's laying everything to waste. So with that in mind, let us go to prayer. God of grace, we want to save the world, and yet sometimes we cannot even begin to save ourselves. And so we gather our thoughts during this time of prayer and pray for ourselves. Teach us how to rearrange our lives so that what you would have us do is our first priority. Grant us the courage to release what we desire and firmly grasp what you would have us to do, to be good stewards, to stand up, to combat that which destroys your creation. Help us to step outside of our comfort zones in your name, and grant us a willing heart to serve you no matter where we are or what we do. Alert us to the needs of those around us, including your earth, and encourage us to meet that need in love, thereby being the church of Jesus Christ our Lord, in whose name we pray.